Hello, and welcome back to the More Money Podcast. My name is Jessica Morehouse. I'm your host of the show. This is episode 293, and this is season 13, guys. Welcome to a brand new season of the podcast. Season 13, I have a good feeling about because, and no one knows this besides anyone, people in my family, but the number 13 is our family's lucky number. I don't know why. I don't know how it started, but we always talk about, lucky 13. So, for example, I got married in 2013. Lucky 13, still married. Fingers crossed. Everything's fine. No, everything's fine. And there was a couple other things I feel like that happened in 13s. I can't remember now, but I feel like, if ever we win a lottery ticket or something, the number 13 is involved. Anyways, there's some good feelings about this season of the show and this, last half of 2021. Very, very excited to get to it. And I'm going to start this season with a great episode with a fellow podcaster. So it's going to be good. I've got Chris Browning on the show. He's the host of Popcorn Finance. He's also a co-host, if that, wasn't enough. He has another podcast called This Is Awkward with actually my last guest on, season 12 was Allison Baker from Inspired Budget. She also now has a podcast of that name. And they co-host a show called This Is Awkward. So very excited to have him on the show. He has some great money advice and also just his story of getting to where he is now, educating people about, personal finance in his fun kind of short form podcast, which is very unique. It was crazy when we're chatting, and you're probably going to find this annoying, but who cares? In the podcast, there are so many times where I'm like, oh my God, that is me. That is literally me. We had so many parallels between our lives, which is so crazy because we're obviously different people, live in different countries, different, backgrounds. It's weird how similar our journeys were, which kind of I kind of like that because it makes me feel like, oh, I'm not alone, it's actually kind of a small world and there's so many things that we can relate about. So you're going to love this episode. But before I get to it, let's talk a little bit about today's podcast episode sponsor. And you know what? I decided to sponsor it myself because throughout this summer, I've been onboarding new students to my Wealth Building Blueprint for Canadians course. And I realized, hey, I need to take this opportunity at the top of my show to tell you about it in case you're new or you just have no idea about it. So it is called Wealth Building Blueprint for Canadians. It's an online course specifically about how to be a passive investor in Canada, so specific to Canadians. Everything in there is applicable if you're Canadian or new to Canada. And yeah, it'll show you just really start from the fundamentals of investing, what you need to know, but then we'll walk you to the point where you can build your own investment plan and then start investing in a passive way. And what that means is investing in a diversified portfolio of low-cost ETFs or index ETFs specifically, so you can grow your wealth long term. So if you were looking for something about, hot stocks or how to get rich on cryptocurrency or just how to get rich quick, this isn't for you. This is not, I don't believe in that type. I feel like that is a kind of gambling. That is not investing. So if you want to, learn how to invest for the long term for your big goals, like home down payment in a very expensive city, like Toronto or Vancouver, or for retirement or to retire early, this is the course for you. So if you want to learn more about this course, well, you can apply at jessicamorehouse.com/WBB. That is jessicamorehouse.com/WBB. Or you can just check out the show notes for this episode. That is jessicamorehouse.com/293. Okay, without further ado, let's get to that interview with Chris Browning. Perfect. Welcome, Chris, to the More Money Podcast. So excited to have you on. Big fan. I feel like I started following you on social media a few years ago and just been creeping on you ever since. And then I'm like, I should probably reach out to him and stop creeping and ask him to be on my show. So here you are.
Well, I'm so happy that you
I know, it's like, thank
out.
you so much. That's too much information. But I'm like, I think that's actually it's like, I don't know you at all, but I feel like I do because I've been following you for so long. So it's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
No, thank you. I actually feel the same way. I've been following you as well. I see your videos. I'm like, you put together such great videos. You're like my inspiration when I see this quality you're putting out there.
I appreciate that. That is so kind of you to say. So I love interviewing fellow podcasters, especially, people who've been, so successful and doing something very unique. And I feel like, we kind of chatted about this before we hit the record button. There's a lot of podcasts out there. And so it's kind of hard, I'd say, to differentiate yourself from all the different podcasts out there, but you do such a good job. I mean, I really like just like the kind of concept of popcorn finance, and that you want to give people this kind of bite-sized but really important information in the time it'll take to make a popcorn, maybe a bit longer, maybe a few bags of popcorn sometimes. I'm like, how long does it take you to do a popcorn? So I think it's like a minute or two. But still, let's say a bunch of different bags of popcorn for the whole family. So I thought that was so interesting, especially since most podcasts like myself are like long form. So it's like, you're going to be on the show for like 30 to 40 minutes. So I think it's great to have something different, especially for people who are just like, just give me the information, which I hear all the time. But before we really dive into your podcast and all that kind of stuff, what I find also very interesting is by day, you are a financial analyst. So you're not just someone who's just talking about whatever they want on your own podcast. You know what you're talking about for sure. What inspired you? Like, kind of, can you give us a little insight into your background? I always am curious. Why would anyone want to become a financial analyst? Because like when you hear that title, you're like, that to me gives me anxiety. Like that does not sound like fun. That sounds stressful and intense. So what kind of inspired you to get into that line of work?
Financial analyst is one of those titles that really doesn't mean anything. Like you could be doing so many different things and have that same title. For me, what kind of makes it kind of relevant to what I do is I focus on budgeting for an organization. So I help them manage specifically their revenue. So I monitor the millions of dollars of revenue that come in and forecast out how much we think we're going to get, how much we think we're going to spend. Is something going to happen in the future? That's what I do. So it's pretty relevant to the whole world of personal finance, just on a much larger scale.
Budgeting, but on a different scale.
Yeah, with way more commas than are in my bank account. So
there's probably a lot more pressure though, because you're not just dealing with like one person's budget. It's like this can affect the whole company and all the people in it.
Yeah, there's a little more pressure, but the good thing is I'm not an accountant. If I was accounting, that type of work is not for me. It's so tedious. But when I get to budget, it's almost like you just kind of thinking what could happen. If it doesn't happen, you're not in trouble. You're like, well, these were just projections. So
that's true. It's like I didn't make up the numbers. No. They were just there. I'm just providing the numbers.
Yeah, I can't control the future. So
yeah, you're right. That's always the best caveat whenever you're talking to someone about investing or what do you think will happen? It's like, well, I don't know per se, but I'm just, my own thoughts on this and my own opinions, but, don't quote me on that,
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So what kind of got you interested? Like, were you always interested in personal finance in kind of the financial world?
Actually, no, not really. I went into college as an art major.
So did I. That's interesting. Really? Yeah. I went to film school, oddly enough.
Look, I've not,
because we just had a conversation about how I'm so not good with technology and equipment. Somehow I have a degree in that. What did you study?
So I went in as an art major because my dream was to work at Pixar. That's what I thought I was going to do. Yeah. I loved like making like 3D models and making in like environments on the computer. We were using like these old Macs. I mean, now thinking back how old those computers were.
I know.
We had to use, flash drives weren't really a thing when I was in high school. We used zip disk, which was just really fat.
I remember
floppy
zip disk,
right? And I'm like, wow, technology has come a long way.
Yeah.
But I thought that's what I was going to do because I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I just knew I was really fascinated by that. So I went to school. I was in art classes. I was in like my first semester, and I was like, oh, I'm not as passionate about this as all these other people. Like these people seem prepared. Like they're like locked in. Like this is their thing. Art's their life. And I'm like, I'm a fan of this stuff, but I didn't feel the same. I noticed it. You could just tell the difference. Like when you're around a bunch of people who really care about something and you just kind of like it, it's you're just different. You're not fitting in.
Yeah, you're like, oh, there's a difference between. That's literally why I did not pursue film after graduating. I'm like, oh, so everyone here is totally cool being a starving artist and dying for their project, and I'm like, well, I don't like to be cold outside, so I don't know if I want to be, in Vancouver on set. I don't like getting up early. It just didn't actually fit with anything that I actually liked in my own personal life. So yeah, I kind of realized, like it, but I don't think this is my true passion. I thought it was, and then you study it a lot, and then you're like, maybe not quite. Because I feel like, at least with me now, and I don't know if you can agree, but because I am such a huge money nerd, I'm like, personal finance is 100% my passion, which is so odd, but it is because I love it so much. Like I really I think about it all the time. I want to talk about it all the time. And I don't think I actually ever really felt like that in film school. I always kind of felt like
Mm.
they let me in somehow. And I'm like, oh my God, someone's going to, like the imposter syndrome, someone's going to find out that I don't know what I'm doing. And somehow got a degree. And I'm like, okay, I guess I, fooled them all, and then decide to do something totally different. So yeah, at what point in your program did you like, I don't know if this is for me. I think I'm going to do something a bit different.
It didn't take me very long.
Oh.
it was my second semester, about halfway through. I remember they gave us this project. So the way I thought, this is how I thought it was going to happen. I get into college, I show up, they give me a Mac, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to make these great animation, films. That's not what happens at all. You have to learn all the foundational pieces.
Oh.
And so I had to do a 2-dimensional art and 3-dimensional art class. And I thought that involved computers. It did not. That was all hand drawing and hand sculpting, which was not my strength at all. So I get to this 3-dimensional art class, and the thing that kind of just like solidified for me, I was like, I'm in the wrong place. Like, we're going to make these sculptures, and they're made out of toothpicks. And each sculpture has like 8 sticks, but each stick is 2 toothpicks taped together. And you're going to have to make 40 of these. And I was like, well, I come clearly in the wrong place because I have no desire whatsoever to work on this project.
I'd rather not.
No. And so I was like, okay, I'm in this existential crisis of, well, what am I going to do with my life? Because my parents were like, are you sure you want to be an art major? Don't you want to eat? Don't you want a place to live? And
my parents asked me that too. They're like, are you okay being poor for the rest of your life? I'm like, and at the time I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm poor now. So, like, I'm like, I know concept. I'm like, I'm a broke student. So like, if it's, I don't know, I guess it's fine. And then you get older, you're like, it's not fine. I don't want to be a poor artist anymore. It's not fun.
You have no concept of money, really, of what you need to live. And like, they were in the back of my mind. Plus, I was starting to realize, I don't really care about this as much. And just pure coincidence, like this is just by chance. They give us, a list of all of the general education classes you need to take to get your degree. And, there's like 20 different things in each category. Like, there's a wide range of classes you can take. I just happened to pick a personal finance class that fit into one of those categories. And I was in that class and I was like, this is really interesting. You're talking about the stock market and investing and all these things that I knew nothing about, but I was always kind of interested. Like, that sounds interesting, but that's not for me. But the way this class was handled and presented, I was like, maybe I want to do finance. Like maybe this could be my thing. My mom was an accountant.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I kind of had I didn't want to be an accountant, but I kind of had the exposure to the finance world, the business world. So I went in, I looked at the program, and I found that they had a financial planning track within. Like, so you could do, like, it had this weird breakdowns. Like, my degree was, it's business administration, but then there's a concentration in finance, and then there's an emphasis they had in financial planning. And I was like, I think that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So I went that semester to the art department and I said, I would like to not be an art major anymore. And I went to the business department and said, I would like to be a business major. And at that point, I went and switched over and kind of changed my path.
Now, because, now you're a financial analyst, did you ever think of becoming, a financial planner and taking that track and setting up your own shop and stuff like that?
That was my plan. So I was like, you know what? I had this different, I had no concept of how the world works and how you make money and all these things. And so in my mind, I don't know how I thought it was going to work, but I was going to teach people about money for maybe not free, but it wasn't going to cost them that much money because, people don't have money and they're trying to learn. So I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but in my mind, I was going to help people who didn't have money learn more about this stuff. And I graduate, it was, I believe, 2009. Right in the middle of the big recession here in the U.S.
That is when I graduated too. It's like we're twins.
We're following very similar paths there, I'm saying.
Very similar paths. That's crazy.
And it was like, I could not find a job. And the only things that were being offered to me were just straight sales jobs that sound like the interview went like this. So what we typically do is have you write down all your friends and family down, their names, their email, and their phone number. And then that's how we're going to start you building your business. And I'm like, this does not sound like a good idea.
Mm-mm.
So, yeah, I was actually working at a bank as a banker.
Mhm.
and I got like my investment licenses, and I just stayed there. I just stayed there for another 2 years after college because I couldn't find other work, and just was at another crisis of like, well, what do I do with my life now? And because my mom was an accountant, she somehow brainwashed me into taking accounting work. And yeah, I did that for several years.
And did you still not like it? Because you're like, no, accounting isn't for me.
Oh, it was horrible. It was
Oh,
horrible.
that's too bad. I always kind of think I'm like, you know what? I think I would have liked accounting actually. I like accounting for my own business, but I don't know if that would have
Mm,
translated into doing it for other people. I'm not sure.
I think it's different when you count your own money versus counting other
Yeah,
people's
yeah,
money.
you're right.
Yeah,
That's true.
it was not for me. I actually ended up like managing like several different payroll departments, and I was just like, "Ooh, I guess is this where I'm at now? I
Yeah,
guess this
this
is
is life,
where I've
huh?
been."
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. I definitely also had that kind of quarter life crisis of I worked a job that, looking back, I'm like, it was actually totally fine. It just had nothing to do with what I wanted to do. It was in sales and marketing for a newspaper, a failing industry,
Oh.
which was very, not a very, safe place to work. But, I was there for 3 years, and then you're like there and you're like, what am I doing with my life? This is not what everyone kind of had this idea of what life would be after college. You're doing it
Yeah.
right. You got your degree. You're so smart. And then you're like, well, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm miserable and I'm in my mid 20s. Is this what the rest of my life is going to feel like? So, it sounds like you came to that same juncture. What did you do to kind of switch paths so you could eventually, get to where you are right now, which seems like you're finally figured out a way to help people, get better with money and free because of your podcast. So,
Yeah.
what was the thing that kind of made you make a pivot?
So I found myself at all of my jobs, like being the one who was showing people how to like set up their retirement plans,
Mm.
answer their questions. Even when I was working at the bank and I was studying for my licenses, I would be the one like holding like study sessions for everyone else because I'm like, oh, I know this stuff. Like I already learned a lot of these things in school, and for most of them, it was like their first time being introduced to these terms and concepts. So we would have like study sessions. I'd be like on the whiteboard, like, okay, this is what this means. This is what a bond is. This is how stocks work. Like I found myself just like being that person in all these different environments. And I was like, this is fun. I enjoy doing this. And I live in Southern California, and all we do is
Ooh,
drive.
that
Like we
sounds
just sit in
nice.
traffic.
Mm, oh yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm just like, oh, that sounds nice. You're like, oh, traffic. Oh yeah, I
Oh,
forgot about that.
yeah, if you want really expensive houses and sitting in hours of traffic, California is amazing.
I mean, we got that here in Toronto, but worse weather. So,
Well, I actually went to Toronto for the first time a couple of years ago.
oh yeah,
I loved it. I
you
loved
did
it.
because most people hate it.
What? Well, I didn't go in the
I
winter,
think it
so
depends on like where you're coming from, but I got a friend who is originally from Vancouver and then now lives in Hawaii with her family. And we did a little house swap, and I think we definitely got the better swap because we went to Hawaii and she's like, Toronto is interesting. Like she definitely thought it was a bit dirty.
I,
And like a very big city. And, if you're coming from Hawaii, I can see where you're like, this isn't better than Hawaii.
yeah, there's few places that you can go to versus Hawaii and say this is better. Like there's not
That's
that many
true. But I'm glad you
places.
like Toronto because, yeah, it's a good city. It's a good city. But
It's
Southern
beautiful.
California sounds like that's the dream for me. That's my husband. That's what his dream is. He's like, can we move to California one day? I'm like, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, it's overrated.
Oh,
It is
okay.
great though. I won't.
Yeah.
It's I love living here. I don't
Yeah.
know where else I would live in the U.S., but there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of us here in this area. You spend a lot of time sitting in traffic, and so I built up this habit of just listening to podcasts. I could listen to so many podcasts like, constantly. And actually, in college, my friend had a video game podcast that no one listened
Oh,
to,
nope.
and I helped him edit it, and like we would talk and have fun. And it's like it was just more so fun for us all to hang out. And so I was like, what if I made a podcast? Like, what if that was my way of teaching personal finance and talking about this stuff? And I came up with the idea and the concept, and then I just sat on it for 3 years. I did nothing.
Really?
Yeah,
Why?
I was too scared. I was nervous. I was like,
Oh.
what if it sucks? What if nobody listens to it?
Oh, that's everybody.
Right?
That's 100% what went through my mind. And that's now after talking to so many people over all these years as I'm now in my mid 30s, I'm like, everyone has the exact same thought about any new idea.
Yeah.
So we're all in the same boat of like just perpetual fear of failure. But you're like, but you'll never know if you don't do it. So what got you to like, what pushed you to like eventually just do it, get going?
So I talked to a few friends and family about it over over that 3-year period. They're like, "Oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds like a good idea. I think you should do it." So I was like, "Well, maybe." And I'm like really into technology. Like I read like tech websites and I listen to tech podcasts. And this app came out, and I think it was called Anchor,
Oh
and
yeah.
you could like make it from your phone, and it was free. And I was like, "Well, why?" I was like, "Why not? Like, what are my excuses?" 'Cause I didn't have a microphone, so that was my excuse for all that time. And so I remember I went to my car, I set up the account. I was at work that day when I found out about it. And I went, I was reading, I was clearly not working because I was on the internet looking at websites. And I went to my car, I set it up, and I started recording from my car. So I would record this audio. And at the time, the way the app worked, it was kind of like an Instagram story where it like disappeared after 24 hours.
Yeah, I remember that.
Completely different how it is now. So
Hmm.
for a month, I would record these like little segments, and like a few people would respond to me, but you couldn't save them. And so I basically, like, when you look back at the history of my show for Popcorn Finance, there's about a month prior to that where I was just recording things that don't exist anymore because there was no
Oh,
way to save it.
so much work lost when you think about that. You're like, it could have been so good, and now it's yeah. I'm glad they changed. Because I'm like, why would I want to create? Like, I get Insta stories because usually they're not like amazing, but yeah, for like a kind of podcast concept, why would you want that to disappear?
Exactly. But I'm so happy that it doesn't exist because
Uh-huh.
they were horrible, I'm sure.
Oh,
Because
okay. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Whereas mine exist and have, and some people find them. I'm like, oh my god, I should really get rid of those. They're not good. They're not good. So you had like a good month of practice before you're like, okay, now this is the real podcast.
yeah, exactly. Before something actually got saved to to the history of the internet forever.
That's amazing. And well, clearly I always think it's like it would have been so cool to see, the evolution if you started 3 years earlier, but no matter when you started it, clearly it was meant to be. Maybe the timing was right when you started, because I always kind of think, it's always right when it happens. Because now your podcast is huge, I'd say. I mean, it's one of the top ones I see people always referring to and talking about. Why do you think it's attracted so many people? Is it partially because again, like the unique part of your podcast is kind of shorter episodes, which is, I think, great because you also look on the other side of the spectrum, and so many of these shows are like 3 hours long. And I'm like, who
Yeah.
has 3 hours to listen to an episode on whatever topic? I mean, personally, for me, I don't have a lot of attention span, so I like a good bite-sized kind of thing. So, yeah, what kind of do you think is that part of the reason people are attracted to your show? Obviously, the content is good too, but
I think it is. I think it definitely, the shorter format is what I think captures a lot of people. That I made it short because I wanted a short podcast. Like when I my attention span was like, I don't want to listen to hours of one show. Like my friend sends me like Joe Rogan clips. I'm like, I don't want to listen to his 8-hour podcast.
no.
I'm
Eight
not looking for
hours
that.
of absolute nothing is what that show is. Believe me, I've listened to a few of those things. I'm like, why am I doing this right now? Why am I listening to this? I don't get it. Don't get it. Not for me. I'm certainly not the demographic of a show, obviously, but still, yeah, I can't listen to 5 hours of someone talking.
No, it's
It's like a
it's so
lecture,
long.
you know?
Yeah. And I think that's definitely part of it. Like it can just, you can pick it up and you're not going to be tied down for a long time. And I think too, one of the things that I've learned doing the show that I think is I've woven in and might be what's bringing people in is that I have the perspective on myself that I don't know everything. I'm constantly learning new things, and this is all like it, personal finance is very unique to the individual, and there's so many different ways of coming to your final destination that you want for your life and your money. And so I try to incorporate that in and like make it a welcoming place where I'm not going to use a bunch of jargon. It's going to be very open for anyone to come in, but also there's not just one way to do these things.
Yeah.
There's flexibility in how we all
Yeah.
manage our money.
I think it's almost so nice to hear that you feel like you don't know everything, because compared to so many other people in the personal finance space, because I mean, anyone can create a social media account or anyone can create anything these days with the internet, but you
Yeah.
actually do know what you're talking about, because you did actually go to school for it and have like you mentioned, you worked at a bank, you have certain licenses, but even you feel like there's so much to know and you don't know everything, which I think is such an important message, because I feel the exact same ways. Like I continue to study. I'm going to become a CFP just so I can continue to learn this stuff. Because I always feel like as much as I know so much more now than I did in the past, but I feel like there's still so much more to know. And it's just, and that's how I think people get really stuck, or just like that kind of analysis paralysis, is there's so much to know. There's no way I can possibly learn this stuff because I never learned this stuff, earlier in life or in school. So I'm not even going to bother. And so it's so important to like acknowledge, yeah, we all kind of feel the same way, even us who have been doing this for a while. But B, it's like, it is really just about taking that one step and then next step. And also, like you mentioned, which I think is so important as well, is realizing that it isn't black and white. There isn't just this is how you do it, this is how you don't do it. Sometimes there are like, well, there's some obvious ones, of course. But I think that's such an important thing that has shifted in the past a few years, is this perspective of there's no one right way to get your solution or to change your life or to fix whatever situation. Whereas when I started blogging 10 years ago and I was reading, some of those traditional books, and there was lots of TV shows and radio shows of these money experts, they definitely had, I feel like, a perspective of right and wrong. This, you're doing it wrong, or like very much like, and I don't know, looking back, were they doing that just to make it more understandable so there wasn't so much ambiguity? Or was that just like the Simon Cowell thing of the day of being very blunt and, do this, not that, or something like that? But I feel like that's also just caused a lot of damage to us millennials, because we have so much anxiety and like self-doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like if I wanted to sit down and talk through all the possible options that a person could take, you would be there. It would be an 8-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. And I get there's sometimes benefit in simplicity and saying, here, just do this. And some people just want that. Some people want to, they're like, just tell me what to do. I don't want any of this other stuff. Just tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. And that's fine. But I think sometimes, like you said, I think for us millennials, I think we're the generation of like, why? Like, why are you telling me to do this? I don't want to do that. What if I want to do something else? And I think for us, I know I feel this way. It sounds like you do as well. Like I want flexibility. I want to tailor my life to what I care about. And if I don't want to do what you're doing, if I don't want to buy a house, what are my other options? You know?
I shouldn't feel like I'm a failure in life because I'm not a homeowner. Because I mean, and I think a lot of that comes down to, especially, going back to our backgrounds, we had very similar backgrounds, going to school, then the recession, and we couldn't find a job. And it's like, this isn't what we were told would happen. We were told you would get a job if you went to school, and we did that and it didn't work out. I think a lot of it comes back to, we were kind of given, in my mind, how I kind of explain it, is like this life checklist of success. If you do this, you'll be great. And I think lots of that was built upon maybe some of the things that our parents weren't able to do. Like a big reason I went to college is because my parents didn't go, and they're like, we really regret it. Definitely, limited us in terms of our careers. We don't want you to experience the same thing. And so I feel like then we had these set of rules, and they were very rigid, and we did them, and it did not work out or in the way that we expected. And so now we're in this kind of, so many years later of like, we are trying to break that mold. And then there's the generation who are younger that I feel like have a different set of rules, or already like so open and free that to me, it's sometimes jarring, because I'm like, oh, wow, we have such different experiences. It's like, it's kind of crazy. But I think it's like so important. Like, I mean, I talk to people all the time from so many different experiences and backgrounds. And it's, it really comes down to personal finance is personal, as cliche as that is, but it is 100% true. Anyways, I do want to kind of get your thoughts on this, because I was actually doing a little Googling on you, and you kind of spoke about this kind of, talking about kind of bite-sized personal finance information. I mean, like I kind of mentioned, anyone can kind of create a social media platform and talk about this stuff, which is good in that we're having more conversations, bad in that anyone can kind of say whatever the heck they want. And it's like, what's true, what's not true, what's fact, what's harmful, what's helpful. What are your kind of thoughts? I know, I don't have TikTok anymore because it was way too much of a waste of my time. I'm like, why am I spending hours on this app? Like, it's not helpful for me in my life. What are your kind of perspectives on that? Especially coming from, your position where you do create kind of shortened forms of content.
Oh man! Just the other day, I found myself on TikTok. Like, I took forever to join. First of all, I was like, "Oh, this is for the younger people."
It is though. Like I do feel old when I'm on there, because I'm like, I don't get the jokes and I don't know the music.
I know when you're Googling jokes, that's when you know you're old. And
that's when you know you're old. Yeah.
And it does, it takes up so much time. Like I find myself just scrolling for like an hour. I'm like, I've been doing this for way too long. And I'm mixed on this topic of like TikTok and other short form social media stuff because one, that's where people are. That's where younger people are going to be at. If you want to reach them, that's where it's going to be at. Like right, like they're not going to be on their computer in a browser looking at
Mm,
articles like maybe we would have. And so it's great because you can meet people where they're at. You can provide the resources and the information. But then also, like you said, there is so much bad information on there because literally anyone can just say whatever they want to say. I had actually was interviewed for an article for Vox about this. We were talking about some of the horrible information that's being spread. It's even gotten worse now with cryptocurrencies really, booming
oh
out
yeah,
there.
yeah,
And you just have to be so cautious. I think that's like
yeah.
it's hard because you have to be knowledgeable enough to know what's bad information.
Yeah, and when you're on TikTok, you maybe this is the first time you've really learned about, personal finance. So you don't have that background to know, oh, wait, that's actually bad information.
Yes, exactly. And the people talk with so much enthusiasm on TikTok that you think it's true. It's like, well, they're talking really loud with a lot of energy. This must be true. They must know what they're talking about.
They're so passionate about what, I should definitely believe them. Or, oh, I know one of the crazy thing, and there's all these little niches on TikTok, like communities that you can get kind of, I guess the algorithm can figure out, oh, you like this, so I'll show you more of this, and you kind of get
Mhm.
stuck. But yeah, it was, I did find, and I find this on YouTube a lot as well. The only way to get, I guess, popular on an app like that is to create content that is popular and viral and interesting. And so some of
Yeah.
that won't be like the actually, important information that people need to know, which is like, this is how to calculate this. It's like, no, it's going to be how to make $1 million overnight or something like that. So
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like you can put out content that's like just take your time, invest in your work retirement plan, open up an IRA, do something very simple over the next 20, 30 years and you'll be great. Like no people are going to flock to that and click it. They're going to click
no.
the one that says I put $25 into Bitcoin and now I have $2.5 million. Like that's what people are going to
Yeah.
click on.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know what the solution for that is, but I don't know. I don't know. I just wanted to talk about it because I'm like, yeah, it is. I really only kind of discovered that world of like TikTok and even kind of Instagram because I feel like I am a very late adopter to like lots of social media. Really, in the past year because of the pandemic, you're just online a lot more, and yeah, it was very eye opening to see what is out there, and it's just so different than when I started a decade ago just
Mm,
with a blog. And it really
yeah.
was like everyone who was in the personal finance, like Canadian community anyway. Yeah, we were just talking about boring stuff like index funds and budgeting and stuff like that. And so to see this big shift, it's like, wow, I can see how that's also like, yeah, very kind of intimidating and kind of scary. It's like, how do you sift through all this stuff to find the actual good stuff? I mean,
Yeah.
I guess listening to our podcast is one way.
Yeah, there you go. You go to trusted resources, people
Yeah.
who you trust, who take a reasonable approach to these things. Because I think just like with anything, if it sounds too good to be true, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm-hmm.
no, well, I want to say there's no get rich quick opportunity, but it's hard because things like cryptocurrency, you've seen people put in not as much money and end up with tons of money. But again, that was a very set of specific circumstances that occurred for that person. And even in many of these circumstances now, the people who are making a lot of money are taking a lot of risk by putting in a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so
And
you,
like you
yeah,
probably know, the people will always talk about their big gains, their successes. They certainly won't talk about the $1 million they lost with crypto or something like that.
exactly. I was actually just listening to your episode about options trading, which was very fascinating, very
Yeah.
interesting. I feel like I learned a ton listening to that
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh, thank
And,
you.
and yeah, you mentioned in there that people don't talk about the
Mm-mm.
losses. No one wants to talk
No.
about that. It's I've heard someone refer to, I think it's like the survivorship
Yes.
bias, where
Yeah.
this person had one good thing happen to them. They told
Hmm.
a bunch of people about it. And so everyone thinks that's how it works now, not that there all the other thousands of people who may have risked it big and lost a lot of money. And you
Yeah.
don't hear those stories often
No,
enough.
because why would you want to shout that, to the masses? Like that's,
No.
kind of embarrassing because it's a failure, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I'm curious, since you do share so many great pieces of information in your podcast, like what is kind of your perspective on some of the things? Like, let's talk about investing specifically. I've had so many guests over the years on this show, and usually what it comes down to, and maybe that's my survivorship bias of like having certain guests on the show that have my perspective, but usually I don't quite know where they're coming from. But in general, I'm not a big fan of active investing. But what is your kind of philosophy when it comes to getting rich eventually and growing your wealth? What do you kind of do?
I am very conservative when it comes to how I approach my investing. I take it very safe, very slow. I I feel like I don't want the stress of knowing I have to go log in and look at my account every day or multiple times a day. Like I don't have the mental energy to be worried about that constantly. So for me, what's been like the most peaceful way for me to invest is I invest through my work plan. I have an individual retirement account I've opened up on my own, and I'm investing in index funds, like something that's just very simple, very basic. But I mean, it has a proven track record of working
Yeah.
for years and years, and it limits the amount of stress that that I have to
Yeah.
feel along the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do the exact same thing. And well, I do invest in some individual stocks. And part of it is sort of a personal experiment just so I
Mm.
can feel like get the experience and know what the feelings are. Cause I think a lot of people also don't they just think about the numbers, not the emotions. And I will tell you, I've
Yes,
been investing in individual stocks for maybe a year and a half now. And really, I'm a buy and holder. But even that is very emotional. Because
it
even
is.
if you see, oh, my stocks are up today, and then you check like a week later and they're down, and then you're like, oh my God. Oh my God, I just lost money. I mean, I'm not investing a ton of money, but it's really hard when you're doing something that you're, invested in like a diversified portfolio of index, funds. It is a lot easier and also I think what people don't, and this is what we, talk about a lot on the podcast is, a lot of people talk about, oh, here's this, Tesla and all these things. And you're like, that is in an index fund. So if you're invested
Exactly.
in an index fund, you will be investing in Tesla, not directly, but it is in this fund. But yeah, okay. That's what I kind of figured when I was doing some research. It's just like, I talked to so many people, and almost every person, no matter, what level they're at as an investment expert, even if they're really a diehard active investor, they always usually come around to be like, but index fund investing is a great strategy.
Yeah,
It's
and
just not exciting. It's
it's
just
not exciting.
pretty boring, but it's great at the same time.
I've heard so many people say, like, I invest in my work plan, but I feel like I want to learn more about investing, and I want like and
Yeah.
they don't feel like they're an investor
Yeah.
because that's too easy. Like if I'm
hmm
a real investor, it has to be harder. I need to know some secrets and more information to really be
hmm
doing it right.
I know. And you're like, I mean, you could do that, but you don't have to. I know
Yeah,
so many people I've had on the show who've achieved fire, and I don't think any of them it's because they just like got really good at stock picking. Almost all of them was like, it's just index funds.
yeah. It
You're
just
like, oh, okay.
it doesn't have that same shine, that same
No.
glamour of those who share their limited stories of becoming very wealthy.
Exactly. So I know you budget for your work and talk a lot about budgeting on your show. What is also your kind of money management strategy yourself? How do you keep your money nice and organized? What do you personally do?
It's changed over the years.
Mm,
I've noticed like when I first was horrible with money and was in a bunch of debt,
hmm
um, it was
Was it
just
student debt or?
it was credit card debt actually.
Oh, we
Yeah,
haven't
so
gone into that. I didn't know you were in debt.
right when I got married, this would have been when was this? I can't. It feels like everything is so long ago.
Yeah, I know.
This was I think 2012. Probably should
hmm
know this. Yeah, 2012. We didn't have any money. Like I was just kind of getting in my first job after leaving the bank, and I wasn't making a ton of money. My wife wasn't making a ton of money, but we're like, well, we got to have a wedding, got to have all these
Yeah.
people. So we ended up spending somewhere around it wasn't a ton comparatively to what people do, but it was
Yeah.
I think like around $15,000 that we
hmm
spent, but it was all on credit cards, so we didn't have any money.
hmm
And then we went, we moved in, bought furniture, got, with medical bills, all this stuff kind of piled up on us all at once, like in the first couple
hmm
of years. And so we ended up with like $27,000 in credit
Wow.
card debt and making
Whew.
like we were probably taking home like $45,000 total at the time.
hmm
So it was not, we weren't making a lot and we had a lot of debt. So around that time is when I started getting focused and building like our first budget. And then it was all about how do I get rid of this debt? It was like, what can
Yeah.
I cut? What can I get rid of? Just have enough money to pay this down quickly. And when we eventually paid it off, it took about 2.5 years to pay off all of the debt. it then began this journey of, well, how do you do this? Like when you don't have debt,
Yeah.
what do you what do you focus on? How much do I put in retirement?
Mhm.
How much do I save for these other things? How much do we enjoy?
Yeah.
And I'm finding myself like it evolves over time. It was a very strict. I'm following every week. I'm looking at what is going on to where now I'm at a point where I automate pretty much everything. It's like, oh, this money goes to retirement, this goes to other
Mhm.
savings. This is going to be sectioned off for bills. And then whatever's left in the account, we can just do whatever we want to do with it.
Mhm.
And I'm starting to
Mhm.
take a little more of a looser hands off approach to
Yeah.
eliminate some of that stress that I was having around budgeting.
Yeah. No, I'm the exact same way. It's I and that's the other thing going back to like what we kind of mentioned that there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Mm.
That's something that I actually struggled with a lot at the beginning, learning budgeting, a decade ago. I'm like, "Oh, this is the, from all these resources, this is the way you're supposed to do it."
Yeah.
And I always kind of like, yeah, it caused me a lot of stress and I mean, it did work, but like just having this sort of system where it's like every line item is important and you can only spend this amount on groceries and just having these really strict categories and stuff like that. It's only until in the past, I guess 4 or 5 years that, yeah, I've kind of changed how I personally budget just to fit my needs. And yeah, it just goes to show you can kind of do whatever the heck you want as long as it's working. If it's not working, then change it. But yeah, I think
Yes.
automation is a really obviously important thing. Like that is just like number one. Also, everyone needs to read The Automatic Millionaire. It was like one of the first books I read. I'm like, well, this makes sense. You can just set it up and automate it. That makes a lot of sense. But then yeah, I also kind of do the situation where it's like, okay, we are saving, money first and investing it automatically, paying our bills automatically, then whatever's left over we can kind of spend. And keeping it kind of simple, but then reviewing it and make sure it works and stuff like that. So yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about the debt stuff because I remember when I first started getting into blogging, there's a huge community of debt bloggers, and they're all
Hmm.
paying off debt, very exciting and inspiring. Then they'd all get to the point where they paid off all of their debt, and then they're like, "What do I do now?" And I think it's
Yeah.
because you get so focused on one goal, you can't. And I talk to so many people, they're like, "Yeah, no, I can't think of anything until my debt is paid off. I can't think of something outside of that," which I get because it's just like any goal. You're like, I just need to get this done, and then I can move on to that. But then you're at this juncture, you're like, now what do I do? And some people get back into debt because that's all they're familiar with, or
Mm.
they're just having
Yeah.
a big time, tough time figuring out what is that next step. So for you, how did you figure out, okay, we did this and now we have to do this next chapter? And it's kind of like starting from scratch a little bit.
Yeah, it's you have this joy of paying off the debt. Like once you get to that point, you're so excited. But then it kind of you kind of hit with, well, what do I do?
Yeah.
Like, that was like my purpose was to get rid of this debt.
Yeah.
And I even remember when I first started the podcast, I talked about my debt a lot, and I kind of was almost like that was like my thing of talking about how much debt we had and paying it off. But then I was kind of like, I don't want to talk about this all the time because I know I need to be prepared for whatever else is going to come after this. So it really was kind of just looking into what other people do, like listen, like really reading and listening to other really smart people who talk about these topics and educating myself and learning what should I be focused on next. And I constantly am changing what my goals are, what I think I want for the future as I hear new ideas. And I think that's one of the things that I've been trying to do more is be open to having the way I think about things changed
Yes.
and not
Yeah.
being saying like this is it, but it's like no, okay, this is what I really believe was true. Like I really wanted this, but it's a year later, and I heard a really good point someone else made.
Mhm.
Um, let me look into this a little bit more, and just being open to change and say, look, this is nothing set in stone. If I felt this way before, I don't have to feel like that for the rest of my life.
Yes. Yeah, really being open. I'm curious, what are some of your goals or what are some things that you wanted to achieve or work towards and then you kind of changed your mind? I'm assuming the pandemic probably changed a lot of things too, because it's just given a lot of people time to reflect on like, what am I doing with my life and my money and everything?
Yeah, exactly. I, I think originally when I first paid off everything and I was like, all right, this is what I'm shooting for. I was in the camp of like, I didn't want to retire when I was like 65. I didn't want to
Hmm.
wait that long, but I was like, I'm okay with retiring at maybe like 55, maybe something like that. And now as I'm looking at it, it's more so I don't think I want to do like a traditional retirement. Like I don't want to retire at like 40 and then do and like just travel around. I don't think that's necessarily what I want, but I'm really fascinated with the idea of having flexibility and working in a kind of like part-time basis, and maybe not like, I don't mean like getting like a part-time job, but more so like working on my own schedule and getting to a point where I don't need as much to live, and then I don't need as much to save. And so now I can make these flexible life decisions. Like if I want to work in a completely different industry, if I want to try something out that's like way different from what I'm doing now, I have the flexibility and options to do that without the stress of feeling like, oh, I have to stay here because I have these obligations I have to cover. So I'm really liking the idea of flexibility, of the to make different decisions because I've prepared enough to just uproot and change things drastically.
Yeah. Sounds a little bit of like minimalism in there, like having less so you need less and you need to save less. But I totally agree. I'm in the same boat where I mean, me and my husband have gone back and forth over the past year, and we're still going back and forth about like, oh, we would love to move. Like, we own a townhouse in the city. It's fine. We have lovely neighbors upstairs that make a lot of noise, and it's not their fault. We love them. But, there's only so many times you can be like, can you please be quiet when you walk? Like, it's their house, like, what can you do?
Exactly.
And also in the pandemic, it's like, we just are so sick of the city. I just want to be in a big open field. You know what I mean? I just need some space. But then it's like, okay, well, if we want to continue living in the city of Toronto and have like a house to ourselves, even if it's just a half house, or we share a wall with our neighbor, that's literally $1.3 million. And it's like, okay, well, that's like adding good $500,000 onto our current mortgage. Is that kind of the life that we want? We would have more space and privacy and independence, but that would limit us with so many different things, especially as we're both self-employed and we like having that flexibility. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, we're just constantly rethinking, what do we want? And then making sure we do not make a decision that's like a big financial decision off of, our emotions, because that's just been like the whole 12 months is like, let's not do anything rash with our money, because when this is all over, we may be like, why are we living in the country?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are we here? We're like 2 hours away from the city. Why did we do this? So yeah, it's interesting, but I think that's kind of a point that everyone gets to. We're like, changing your mind is okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think we put so much pressure on, you need to figure this out.
Yeah.
And you need to just keep going. You figure this out.
Yeah.
This is where you're going now. Just keep going there. Don't stop.
Yeah, don't stop.
And don't rethink your plans. But I'm gaining an appreciation for having the flexibility of saying, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think that's why I've kind of gravitated towards, I guess it's like a form of minimalism, because I'm like a huge fan of tiny homes, and that's kind of all wrapped in the whole minimalism world. And I'm finding that what I make is what I make. That's my salary, but that's not what I need to live. And keeping my expenses low gives me that flexibility. And I think it's, like you said, it's giving me options to make different decisions, to if I want to move out of the city, if I want to go over here and try this area for a little bit, you have that option because you're not tied so much to your financial needs. So I mean, I definitely get it, because there's so many options. It feels like
so many options,
so many
which I
ways
think
you
is
can
the
go.
exciting part of personal finance, and what kind of drew me into it is, it's once you learn this stuff, you can apply it in so many different ways to achieve so many different things that could ultimately, hopefully, bring you more happiness, joy, fulfillment, and that's the kind of cool thing about it. It can work. You can use it as a tool however you like, and so it's the possibilities are endless, and that's an exciting good thing.
Yeah, it really is. That's a great way to put it. It is a tool.
Yeah. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. I'm sure I'll want to have you back on the show, because I had such a great time with you. Where can people find more information about you? You have 2 podcasts, and I don't think I really mentioned the second one, but you have Popcorn Finance. You also have another show called This Is Awkward. What's that one about, actually? I'm assuming it's just about the awkwardness of talking about money, or...
It is. I have a co-host on that one, Allison of Inspired Budget. We host that show together.
Yes, she's been on the show as well. I love her. She's great.
She's so great. She's the energy. I was like, I need someone with energy if I'm going
Yeah.
to do another podcast when I'm tired. But yeah, for that one, we actually talk about awkward money situations that we all deal with, and we have people call in. So people call in, or they'll write in, and they'll share an awkward money situation that they dealt with, like a family that wants to tell you how to spend your money, or friends who borrow money and never paid it back, like those type of things that we all deal with. And you don't want to deal with it, but you have to. And we give our feedback on how we would handle the situation if we were in the same boat as our callers and our writers.
Oh,
so
I love that.
Yeah, that's what we do on This Is Awkward.
That's amazing. So people can find you on all podcast platforms to listen to Popcorn Finance. And This Is Awkward. Where can they follow you? I mentioned your Instagram, but you also have a website.
Yeah. So if you want to reach out to me, probably the fastest way is Instagram. So Popcorn Finance Podcast. You can just find me there. And if you go to popcornfinance.com, there's also links to This Is Awkward there as well. So you can see both podcasts all in one spot.
Amazing. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. I can't wait for more people to discover your show from my show and just binge all of your episodes and also be able to kind of continue to follow your personal finance journey, because it seems like you're still on that journey. I mean, I guess I still am too, but I always love like hearing about people where they started from and then following them along to see where they end up.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great talking with you. And also, these conversations help me think through these ideas. And I'll probably have a new concept of what I'm looking for after talking to you right now. So I appreciate it.
Me too. Maybe a tiny house is in my future. I don't know.
I mean, I think about it. I think about it all the time.
Me too. I need a separate one for my husband. I tell him that all the time. Like, we couldn't share one. We need separate ones. I need my own space.
Yeah, you need a couple. Because
we need a couple.
You can't be in that tight space together all the time.
No, we need a few tiny houses. But then at that point, is that just a real house?
Exactly.
Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
And that was episode 293 of the More Money Podcast with the wonderful Chris Browning, creator and host of the award-winning short-form podcast Popcorn Finance and the call-in money advice show This Is Awkward. You can find more information about him at popcornfinance.com. And of course, you can follow Popcorn Finance and This Is Awkward on any place that you can find podcasts. If you're listening to this podcast, then you could very easily find out where his podcasts are, probably on the same platform that you're listening to right now. So make sure to check him out on Twitter. You can find him at Popcorn Finance, and on Instagram, it is at Popcorn Finance Podcast. Now, I've got so many updates because obviously it's been a whole summer since I've talked to you, so a lot has happened in the past couple months. So I want to give you a little bit of an update, but before I do just want to remind you about my Wealth Building Blueprint for Canadians course. You can apply at jessicamorehouse.com/WBB, but of course I'm, there's information right on the homepage of my website, jessicamorehouse.com, or just go to the show notes for this episode, jessicamorehouse.com/293. But if you're a longtime listener or even a new listener and you came to this podcast because you want to learn about, wealth building. How can you afford to retire one day or retire early? Or how can you afford to, grow your money so you can eventually have enough money to buy a house in, Toronto or Vancouver? Because putting cash in the bank and just in a savings account is not gonna work for you right now because of the high inflation and low interest rates. Anyways, so if you're interested in learning more about how to, what are the building blocks of investing, and then how to make an investment plan, and then how to actually start investing, well, that is why I built the course. It is to help any Canadian who wants to learn the fundamentals of investing and then how to actually go about it in a strategic and methodical way. And so if you want to learn more about the course and also read some testimonials from all the current students who I gotta say it, they absolutely love the course, just go to jessicamorehouse.com/WBB. Okay, so now for some exciting information, a little bit of a life update since my last episode, 292. Okay, so what have I been up to this summer? Well, like I mentioned, I was able to take some time off during the summer, which is great. I visited my family for a good 3 weeks and caught up with them because I haven't seen them in, over a year because of COVID. And that was so lovely. I also, because I think I mentioned this at the end of I'm sure I mentioned this in episode 292 when I was wrapping up this podcast, that this summer I'd be busy studying for an exam, which I really, really hoped I was going to be able to tell you that on this episode to open up this season that I passed. And if you follow me on Instagram, you will know that did not happen. I failed. I big time failed. No, it wasn't a big time. That's even more irritating. I failed by just a tiny little bit. I know why I failed. It's because I rushed it. I got impatient while taking the exam. Do you ever take an exam and you're like, oh my God, is this over yet? Whatever, it's good enough. Let's hit submit. And then, I hit submit and it said fail. So I was literally 4 questions away from passing. So this is what I'm going to be doing this fall, is studying for that exam again and taking it during the busiest season of my job and my life. I always find the fall is just crazy. So I've got a lot of, kind of speaking gigs coming up, which I'm excited about, some in person, some most virtual still, which I'm really excited about. But, and also I will hopefully be launching this new course that is more about financial planning this fall. So I will share more details about that. You can sign up to my email list to find out when it will be available. So just go to jessicamorehouse.com/subscribe to get onto my email list. Oh, that reminds me though, a few updates as well that I've been slowly updating so many things. Hopefully I will have a new website next year, like early next year, but I have like new brand colors, new fonts, which I'm trying to integrate into my current assets and stuff like that. Not like you give a crap, but it's something exciting for me. But one thing that I did update was my free resource library. Before it was hosted on my website. Now I'm hosting it on the same platform I host my courses. So it is so much nicer and easier, more accessible. So if you want to sign up for my free resource library, there's a bunch of past webinars, there's downloads, some budget spreadsheets, all for free. Just go to jessicamorehouse.com/resources, or just go to jessicamorehouse.com/shop. Actually, there's links for that there. You can also find my budget spreadsheets on there, a link to my online course. Also, I do have some merch still, so make sure to check that out, jessicamorehouse.com/shop. But I will say the biggest change that is happening literally as we speak, and this is why I have never been more stressed out in my life. This is why I remember why I hate like moving. Moving sucks. I'm moving. So I think I also talked about this in a previous episode, but basically me and my husband came to the conclusion that we need to move. And a big reason, there's a lot of reasons. Part of it is like, hey, this is a good time to sell. We've, our place is appreciated significantly. The neighborhood is getting, it was up and coming when we first bought it. Now it is getting busier. There's a lot of applications for developments of new condo buildings right in our neighborhood, which means it's going to get even busier, and the traffic and the noise. I want out. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm sick of this neighborhood. We've outgrown it. We need to change, but also, the neighbors we have above us, lovely people. So it is not personal. However, they're noisy as hell, and I cannot sleep anymore. I can't, because they wake me up every day at 6:30 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. every single day like clockwork, even on the weekends, and I can't do it anymore. I can't. So we're moving. So we're listing our place. I will totally update you when things start moving. But basically, as of me recording this episode, which is like September, or me recording this outro, it's September 7th for a reference point. We are going to be staging our place and listing it next week. So I think it'll already have been listed and stuff by the time this podcast is out, and hopefully, fingers crossed, sold, because it's a pretty crazy market here in Toronto, and I hope, like our realtor says, it's not unlikely that we'll be able to sell it within a week. And then once we sell it, then we're going to be looking for a new place to live. Still gonna hopefully stay in the city, but I don't know what's going on. Like, it is not fun to be a buyer in this market. I'm so excited to sell, not excited to buy. So we're just going to see what happens. If it means that we're going to be renting for a little bit, we'll rent. If we buy a place, right away because we find a great place, then we'll buy it. I have no idea. I will update you on what's going on, but that's what's been going on with me. A lot of things. Oh my God, I'm so stressed out. I've never been so stressed out in my life. Like, why does everything have to, I'm sure you can relate, because this is like the story of my life. Why does everything always happen all at once? Like, all of the things in one short amount of time, when there's other points in your life where there's nothing going on. And then there's times where everything's going on. Why can't we have some balance here? But anyways, that's what's going on with me. So I'm just like, trying to manage everything and not go crazy. So that's like the big news with me. We'll be excited to share, the journey along with you while it happens. I'm very worried about being a bit homeless, like being in between of like selling this place and not having another place to live. I'm really worried about that. I'm not excited about it, but what can you do? Anyway, so that's really the big news I've got for you. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Oh, other exciting news. I've got a bonus episode for you tomorrow. It's super special. I don't know if I even want to share who it's with, but it is an interview with someone very special to me. No, I'm just going to make it mysterious. So you're just going to have to listen to, check it out tomorrow. Subscribe to this podcast. Check out the new episode that will drop tomorrow, and you'll find out who is the special guest. And actually, well, technically I'm the guest. So anyways, but there's someone else involved in the episode. Anyways, that's all I'm going to say. Okay. So thanks again for listening, and a big shout out to my podcast editor, Matt Rideout. I will see you back here tomorrow for that special episode.